Hi, I hope you're all doing well. Listen, in this look at chapter 13 of Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, we're going to go over some concepts of looking into the future. What Dr. Rumeld is proposing that you use the dynamics of the situation to kind of figure out a way forward. Obviously, if you've been reading his book and you see his examples, and he has video lectures, and you can look at those too. He's obviously intellectual. He's been in academics most of his life. He's been in this business for most of his life, and so he's a thinker. He's a strategic thinker, and he approaches his problems in that way. It may not be as applied as other people in business. However, he has been in consulting in business quite a lot, so he has good insights. And I think this is useful when you look at something. So sometimes when you try to look into the future, when you're right in the middle of something, it's very difficult to see what happened and what is happening. And it's only when you look back. If you look back on the financial crisis of 2008, it seems like a long time ago now, but having lived through that, it was unbelievable what was going on. The biggest hit to our economy since the Great Depression. And it took a bit of time. When I was in the middle of it, you couldn't really see what was happening. Why did this happen? A year or so afterwards, you could really understand it, and you could see what happened. But it would have been very difficult to predict that. Some people did, and they're billionaires, but there were only a handful of them that were able to predict what was going to happen, purchase financial instruments on the other side of whatever everybody else was doing, and make a huge fortune. Read that book, The Big Short, fantastic book, and that will help explain that very well. Anyway, in this chapter, what he's saying is that there are certain things, it's hard to predict the future, but you can look at certain things. And his things they're looking at is escalating costs, and was one of them. For example, when you see an industry with escalating costs, for example, the banking industry with all the much higher costs in terms of really the second point, which is deregulation, but you put those two together, on the other side, with banks being over-regulated in terms of customer, the way they treat customers, etc. It's oppressive to work in a bank with the amount of regulations that are there, and the amount of staff you have to hire to comply with that. So those two things going together, over-regulation and rising cost, lead to a huge amount of mergers. There are less than half the amount of banks that were in the 80s because of these forces that are. So you could think, now if I'm going to do something, you're in the banking space, you're thinking you're going to deal with a smaller pool of bigger banks and a whole bunch of little banks that are really struggling with costs, and that's your kind of future. How can I work into that? Another thing is predictable biases in forecasting. It's really true. People expect things to go the way they want them to or the way they should, but it doesn't go that way. Look at the last election, or look at any election. People predict things because they want to hear them. They want to say they want it to be that way, or maybe it should be that way. The fact is, it doesn't work that way. All companies will have like a hockey stick. They say, well, we're down here, but then we're just going to grow like this. This product is going to just take off like that. They're all the same. But it doesn't happen. The product goes like this, or it goes like this, or it goes like that. So the reality is different, but you can kind of discount this very predictable bias that managers and most of the newspapers, everybody is predicting the future, will just basically have a trend that is just based on the past and is very often wrong. Some trends are true, like the internet. When people came out and said, oh, this is going to change everything. When I was way younger, they said, oh, there's going to be a computer on everybody's desk. It didn't happen next week, but it did happen. These kind of things, when you can see the technology and the reduction in costs and the reduction in size and how that trend that's going, and you can apply that. If people didn't agree with that, but at least some people did predict that, and they saw the future in that area. The incumbent response to change. Existing companies, industries, people will resist change. So sometimes what they're saying, even at their position, it sounds right, but it isn't, because it's based on two things. Really, they're predictable in what they're saying, and also what they want is things to more or less stay the same, and they won't. So you have to kind of factor that in. And then there's what he calls the attractor state, is company, how they should move, what they should do. Often that has a pull, not so much in an individual company, but as an industries overall. Over time, people should have more choice in what they're doing. Over time, prices should go down. Over time, people should have their their consumer needs met. Over time, the communication between people should be more streamlined. That's what they want, and that's what technology is able. So you can think, now, over time, these things are going to happen, and how can that affect my decision making? I think these are pretty high level, and I don't know how much they actually help us predict the future. However, they are useful to look at your big picture things on what things are happening. For me, I think that one way to look at the future is looking at our strategy process. Go back to your original principles of strategy on the steps that we look at in the Inspire Logical Strategy That Works book, and look at those steps, and you'll see, and strategy, and I think you can apply that to trying to predict the future. Specifically, come up with what do you want as in your age and your stage in life? What are you looking to do? What kind of thing? I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to have my own business. I want to do whatever it is. What do you want to do? Then do a really good SWOT analysis of what the situation is, and come up with ideas. Given where you are, given what's going on in your company and your work, etc., and what you want, what kind of ideas would get you there? All strategic forecasts are really a prediction to the future. So why not think a little bit bigger on something, what's really going to happen in the future in a bigger context, not just my own company. I think the same concepts apply. Then you test those ideas with logic. Obviously, it's going to be difficult because you're talking about the future. However, using the same, why, how do you know, who, when, and what will happen process will get your mind shaped around more or less higher percentage predictions into the future, and that's what you want. And then develop the action step to get you there and put it down on paper. So really, remember, a budget, a strategic plan, etc., they're all predictions on the future. Extend that, widen that, use the same process, and use your mind to see if you can come up with something that can help you kind of get an insight into what's going on in the future. Whether you do it for your company or for yourself. Again, these are exercises not so applicable, but it's something to have in your mind, and some people will really enjoy thinking about the future in this way. All right, thanks a lot.